Thank you for tuning in to Cop with Comic. I'm Brian Koppen, and we're here with comic Julia Jeffries. Julia Jeffries, how the hell are you?
I'm good. I'm hanging in there.
Yeah, it
Trying to
sounds
take
like
things.
somebody's vacuuming your house. That's pretty good.
Yeah, got to keep things clean. It's the
You got,
little things.
yeah, you either have a great roommate or some sweet help, let me tell you. But yeah, I follow you here. You're on Julia Jeffries with a Z on both Instagram and Twitter. And so is that where you're going to post us on all the shows you got coming up? Like you also co-host Work Night with an E, Work. And is that being Zoom? And was it was in person before?
Yeah, so Work Night is a dragon comedy showcase that I co-host with a very close friend of mine named B. Belize, and
Nice.
we started we started the show in December, January at Branded Saloon in Brooklyn, but have since, obviously, with everything that's going on, we've taken it virtual. So we do that on Instagram Live,
Okay.
and the next show will be on August 9th. So you should definitely check it
Wow.
out. Yeah.
And so it's comedy and drag, and so they can get like, do you have a link and a password for people so you're not getting Zoom bombers and stuff? But I guess it's Instagram Live.
Yeah, it's just anyone can join it. So I just encourage people
Oh,
to follow us. And we usually have like a pretty good number of people on there, people sounding off in the comments. So
yeah.
it's a fun time.
And you
Yeah.
got big time comedians. You got former guest Dylan Adler on there, but also people like, Calvin Cato, who's a big name. So you got some big time comics, right?
Yeah, try to get
Yeah.
mostly queer comics to do the show, and really just make it a place to like celebrate queer comedy and drag. And it's usually a really fun time.
Oh, good. And then kind of what can you can educate somebody like me about queerness? What does it encompass? Is it I know there's a spectrum of gender and there's a spectrum of sexuality. Is queer just somewhere like you're like, okay, here's where I fall on gender, here's where I fall on sexuality, or is it one or the other? Like is queer gender strictly gender? Is it strictly sexuality, or is it one or both?
One or both. Yeah, I
Okay.
think it's really like however someone chooses to identify themselves, is it can be used in whatever way. I think like for me personally, I identify as queer because of both my sexuality and my gender presentation. And like I think also important too is like these things can change over time for different people. And so it's just a term to encompass the fluidity of our sexuality and gender expression.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's like it's an umbrella term for all of these different things for sure.
And I suppose some of these things they depend on like you pretty much like you feel how you feel, right, in certain
Mm-hmm.
situations, and it can change via situation, and you like who you like depending on the person, and you present how you present depending on certain situations. But is some of this just trying to describe it in lingo, like you don't care what it's called until people start calling you something that you're uncomfortable with, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if I'm somebody who hates the male body so much that I want to I want to transition to a female, present as a male, but only get with women. Like
Mm-hmm.
that has a certain term that I don't really have to figure out unless I'm going to actually go live those truths, and I want people to respect them in how they refer to me, how they treat me, etc.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like with the term queer specifically, I think, it was once a term that was derogatory, and so it's a way for people who are part of that community, myself included, to reclaim it, and really make people. I think what's so interesting about it is it can also make people who maybe don't identify with the term question their own identity, because I think that we've all come up under certain social structures and norms without having to question our own expression or our own sexuality. And so I think what I love about the term queer, especially when I was like first coming out, is that I think it's really just a term that encourages us to question the norm and the boxes that like society tries to put us in.
Yeah, because I
And
would think if there's no boxes that society are putting you in, then I would think that lesbian and gay would almost be subsumed in something like queer. Like if
yeah,
queer is two spectrums, one gender, one sexuality, and people can just pick where they fall, then and there's no stereotypically masculine or feminine attributes, then it could just be under one catch-all. But certain people are like, well, society does put them in boxes, so I want to communicate what I am. I want to
exactly.
attract the right people to me. I want to let people know that I'm attracted to women. I present as a woman, but I'm attracted to women, and so here is my description, so everybody knows if they can date me or not.
Totally. Yeah. And I think like you're bringing up a good point, which is like so much of this is it's both about how people perceive us, but it's also about how we perceive ourselves. And so I think like something that I've certainly struggled with and that I think a lot of queer people struggle with is like, why, like, am I using these terms for myself or am I using them to signal something to other people? And I think like the reality of the situation is that it's like both, right? Like we do live in a society that is unfortunately very binary, and so like you're saying, it is useful to have words that signal to other people how we want to be perceived.
Yeah.
But also, obviously, we need to be comfortable, or the ultimate goal is for us to be comfortable with the words that we are using to describe ourselves.
Yeah, and some of the stuff gets so specific
Mm-hmm.
that like not all that stuff needs to be signaled in certain environments. So let's say I'm a and in some of this there's a kernel in me where there's a kernel of truth here. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so if I and this is just a kernel, and so I shouldn't fucking put on whatever. Okay, but if I had the
Mm-hmm.
choice, I think men are disgusting, and I don't know that I would choose a man's body.
Mm-hmm.
I don't,
Yeah.
but I also wouldn't want to present as a woman, just because
Yeah.
how women are treated,
Yeah.
how women go to the bathroom, like certain
Mm-hmm.
things. Like I'd want to keep certain things are more convenient as a dude, but I'm still attracted to only women because men repulse me, and so
Mm-hmm.
like, but also like certain things like a top or bottom or a power bottom or like certain of these things like the description gets so lengthy where you're like, yeah, but we're at work. Nobody needs to know
Yeah.
if you're a top or bottom at work. And of course, that's just trying to be funny because, of course, nobody is saying I'm a top or a
Yeah.
power bottom at work. But like some of these things, like you would almost argue that being a lesbian might not be relevant at work, but I suppose it only becomes relevant when you get discriminated for it. Like when people find out that Jamie is dating Cindy from accounting. Well,
Yeah.
they didn't put lesbians on their stationery. They only became
Well,
lesbians when you fired them for
yeah.
dating each other.
Well, I think it's relevant insofar as like people assume I think it becomes relevant because a woman who is more feminine presenting is assumed to be straight. And like, regardless of whether that topic comes up at work, like, people just assume that. And so I think that the goal is then to, like, that's a situation in which a woman who identifies as feminine would, like, want people to know, like, or would want people to understand something about her identity that wouldn't become readily apparent. Um,
But in the
like
work
I think,
context, would that ever be like, other than cueing in your coworkers, your female coworkers to hit on you, like would that be relevant then? Like
I
like
don't,
like why
I
would
don't,
who I have sex with, me, like even if I want to signal to people at work who I want to hit on me, it's an inappropriate period. Like meaning if I want to make like if I come off as a little gay or something and I want the
mhm.
girls to know that they should hit on me, I don't go around like putting I'm straight on my stationery so the girl at work can hit on me because that's not part of my job description.
I don't, yeah. So I don't think it's relevant at work, but I think unfortunately, like, people make assumptions and try to put us in boxes even when it's not appropriate. So like, regardless of whether it's talked about, people are gonna assume certain things about someone's sexuality, and like that might make that person uncomfortable because you're not having the fuller picture of who that person is.
But
And
is that
also
is
I
that
think,
important? Is that important? Like meaning
well,
as far as you're saying, like I know it's important as a person,
yeah.
but should it be important as an employee? Like should the employee have the right to be like, oh, you're not getting a full picture of me as a person? And
Mhm.
they're like, well, I'm paying you for a job description, and so I don't care if you also art and craft at home. Like, I'm not going to
Yeah.
allow you to, give me a fuller picture of yourself by putting your Etsy arts and crafts sites on the stationery in the same way where, yeah, you want me to know who you want to have sex with, but it's not relevant to your job description.
But I think that sexuality, yes, it's like about who you want to have sex with, but like sexuality is also for a lot of people a proxy for being a part of a certain community and having a certain like life experience
Oh,
that becomes about more than just who you're attracted to, and also becomes about like who you like, where you like to spend your time, like what life experiences you've had, how you grew up, like sexuality and gender expression are about just those things, and also about so much more.
and so
Um,
you're saying also though by like saying I'm a lesbian at work, there's also a community at work.
yeah,
Meaning
there
work,
might
work,
be.
work isn't just work, I guess you're
Yeah,
saying. And so
yeah,
me saying I'm a lesbian is just acknowledging the obvious, which is
mm-hmm,
work isn't just work. It's also a culture that,
totally.
takes certain gender norms and sexual norms and kind of plays with them a little bit, even if you're going to a ladies' night. It's like, dude, I actually identify as a female. Like I present as a male, but I
Yeah,
identify as a female. Like this ladies' night thing shouldn't be a part of work, but you guys made it a part of work. So let's talk about it.
yeah, yeah,
And then how's the stuff making its way in your comedy? Like, are you talking about being black and queer on stage?
definitely. Yeah, I would say like that is what I spend most of my time talking about. I think I've found that having opportunities to talk about um, my queerness and my blackness on stage has actually been really healing for me. I think I've had, just like little interactions with people, like people looking at me weird in certain bathrooms or traveling to certain places and feeling scared because I'm a black person, like having the opportunity to sort of process that on stage and make light of that on stage with other people, I have found to be very therapeutic.
Wow.
And I think that a lot of audience members, even if they have not had that same experience, can like empathize in a certain way with
Yeah.
certain things that I've maybe shared about.
Yeah. And I mean, but I love the. I mean, like, if you weren't, if you couldn't be talking about these things on stage, would
Hmm.
you have to go to therapy? Do you think? Like, do you think that like these things are so, you get these reactions from people, and they're so just, I don't know, interesting or infuriating or whatever, that you
Yeah.
kind of need to talk. If you were not a stand-up, how else could you get this stuff out? Like, you'd be an artist of some sort, I would think. Like, you have to express these things.
Yeah. I mean, I should say I also am in therapy. So I
I love it.
stand up doesn't do like the full picture of making me like a completely um, whole and person who doesn't need to process things. But yeah, I do think it does help to have a creative outlet for it, because if you're just talking about it in therapy, or you're just talking about it with like your family or your partner, like it can become very heavy and like
Yeah.
daunting. And so I think in addition to that heavy and daunting work, which is for me at least like very necessary and a very important part of my healing process, it does help to have something that is a bit lighter, and that I can laugh about.
Yeah, I don't, it should not be heavy at all. That's so funny. Like in talking about this stuff and thinking about this stuff, like yeah, as with comedians and stuff like that, it's so funny that these things that we should be talking about are actually heavy to most people. And you're
Mm-hmm.
like, dude, you're just living like your life perfectly. Like you figured out who you are and
Mm-hmm.
what you want and how you're gonna fucking present and like
Yeah.
that, and you're gonna draw the right people to you. Like that's why I like being
Yeah.
so open and honest on a podcast and why I think people do well to speak their truth on stage because you're attracting your fan base to you. You want to attract the right fans to you. Like, why would you live somebody else's truth and attract the wrong fan base to you?
Yeah, I've definitely found that. I think like when I first started, so I started doing stand up in Boston, which is a very different and smaller stand up community than the sort of like queer scene that I've found here in Brooklyn. And I feel like, when you go up on stage in front of a group of people and you're like talking about these experiences, but you feel like you're saying, like, like the way that these people are reacting to what I'm saying, like these just aren't my people. But because like they're the majority, then you start to question yourself of being like, well, am I just not good at this? Like, is this not for me? Am I doing something wrong? But I think in finding people here and like mics here that I feel more comfortable at, and like shows that I've done, like it is cool to be like, oh yes, like there are people who are hungry for this kind of honesty and openness and vulnerability in comedy.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see that other people are also doing that really well, and
Yeah.
feel like I can be a part of that community. So
Because
it's been a
that's
lot
all,
of
yeah,
fun.
that's all people identify with is vulnerability and humanity. And the fact, like at the
Totally.
beginning, you probably were thinking, okay, is there an order I can say these things indifferently that this Boston crowd will laugh?
Yeah.
Or am I
Right.
really just needing to find a different audience? And then you're like, well, does that mean I'm niche? Does that mean, and I think I talked about this earlier today on a different episode, like, should I sand down certain edges so that I'm acceptable in all rooms? And it's like, no, if your niche is big enough, and, of course you can't reduce queer to niche, but meaning
Hmm.
like, if it's big enough, and I think it is not just because there's LGBTQIA or whatever it is, but
Hmm.
everybody empathizes with you're raised one way, and guess what? I'm not that way. Like either I'm not that way or I don't want to be that way.
Hmm.
And so here's what I am, and so now you're going to have to deal with what I am instead of who you raised me to be. And I think
Yeah.
like, and that's just people like with immigrant parents or whatever, they have the same type of thing. Like, Albanian
Totally.
comedy, Leonardo Joni is like, I didn't know that people related to this until I had Jamaican people come up after the set and be like, that's my mom.
Yeah.
And I'm
That's
just like,
such a good
wow.
point.
Yeah. And so it's
Yeah.
like, I think people can empathize with, living their truth and the fact that that might be uncomfortable to some people who raised you to live a different truth. So was it kind of
Yeah.
an aha moment to be like, I'm trying this little Hellraiser puzzle of changing this joke around, saying this joke a different way, calling myself this instead of this. Did you kind of have that early on? And what was the aha moment? Was it when you moved to New York City and found those mics? Or did you kind of have the realization in Boston that had you moving to New York City?
I think for me, a big part of it was just confidence and like being more comfortable on stage. Because like you say, I think in addition to people responding really well to vulnerability and honesty that a comic has, I think people also respond well to confidence. Like if you're watching a stand up and they seem not sure about a joke they're about to tell, as an audience member, you're probably going to be like, well, should I laugh at this? And it's like, right? But it's like, if I can go on stage and like sort of give the audience permission, I think especially with things like identity, like race and queerness, like some audiences need to feel permission from the comic that like, okay, this is a joke I'm supposed to laugh at. And I think, I think when the comic can present in a way that's confident and like sort of give the audience that permission, then it just, so I think for me that's what happened, is like just being up there more, having a couple of like good mics in Boston, and just realizing like, oh, when I almost like stopped caring and just appeared more confident,
Yes.
it things went better for me. And then I moved to New York because my partner was starting residency here. So that was like, that happened to be very lucky for me, because now I
Yeah.
kind of like can't imagine doing stand up anywhere else.
Good. Well, it's so
Yeah.
funny. Like, who knew that owning your shit would would kind of
Right?
give people permission to laugh at what you're comfortable with. It's like, no, you're not laughing at me. There's
Right.
something that happened here that's kind of funny, and because I own my shit, I'm giving you permission to laugh. I love that. And so, can we expect this stuff at work night? When's your next work night? WERK. When's the next show?
Absolutely. So the next work night will be on Sunday, August 9th at 8 p.m. on Instagram Live.
Yes. Nice.
So follow us there. And yeah, I will do some stuff. We've got two amazing comics coming on that I'm working on getting. And yeah, we'll have some drag as well. So it'll be a lot of fun, a lot
Yes.
of a lot of people living their truths and owning their shit, which is
Yes, full
kind of what this
circle.
has become all about.
Oh,
Yeah.
dude, Julia Jeffries does the callback. She's a master at her craft, and we will check that out. Work night. And it's August 9th at 8 p.m. Instagram Live, and it sounds like I can just kind of mix it up. There's no code. There's no permission. Like I can, is there a place for me to chat during the show? How am I able to like let you guys know that you're doing, you're being hilarious? Like,
Yeah. So
is my mic on, or do I tweet? Do I chat emojis, or what do I do?
ooh, sorry. You can just type in the comments. So there will be like a running stream of comments. And yeah,
Nice.
you can just write in there. We try to be as interactive as we can. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, as you can, because these people are working hard. It's drag and comedy. They're working their asses off.
Yeah,
So they
it's a
might not
lot.
be able to chat you back. So just sit there and laugh. That sounds great. Julia Jeffries, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.